or altered because of the city being brought to a standstill, but they managed to figure out a way to live, to get by. The Egyptian people are renowned to get by regardless of the situation or conditions they're put through. The real people who are actually suffering are the huge millionaires and the people who have been supporting this regime, at least according to it. It's the big businesses that are losing money. And as far as the protesters are concerned, the pro-democracy ones, they're like, these people have stolen our money and have not divided the wealth of the country equally, and therefore we have no problem making them lose the millions that they're losing a day. At least that's their viewpoint on the ground. So the resolve is still very much strong, and we wait to see what happens today.
Yeah, that's one of the points I wanted to pick up on. You mentioned that everything has come to a standstill for X amount of, like, nearly 10 days now, including businesses. From the people that you've been speaking to there, is there a sense that people are just living in this kind of bubble right now where they're not even concerned about what life could be like after?
Yeah, I'll tell you, many a person I've spoken to said they dreamt of the day that they could come out in the streets and openly express themselves. So it is almost a dream come true for the thousands and more than thousands of Egyptians who've taken to the streets, because these scenes are unheard of. The political participation, the civic responsibility that's been on demonstration through the neighborhood watch groups, through people coming out with different banners expressing themselves. So they're living a sense of they don't want this dream to end, essentially, and that's why for many people it is not only the blood that's been shed, it's not only the buildings that have been destroyed, but it's the fact that they've waited their lifetime to speak out, and that's why they're not going to give up, and that's why that resolve gets stronger by the minute.
Thank you so much. We'll of course be speaking to you later. Now, on your screen is a top shot of Tahrir Square. As you can see, there are people gathering there, and you can hear chants of people. You can see that after a night of violence, people are once again coming together in Liberation Square. Let's go to one of our correspondents who is there. Can you tell us what people are chanting?
They are. They're basically there. He's got kids waiting for him.
We're going to try and get you our correspondent, but let me tell you what's been happening. People are once again gathering in Tahrir Square. This is Liberation Square. We do You're watching Al Jazeera, and what you're seeing right now is people gathered in Tahrir Square. We're bringing you the latest from Egypt. This is Cairo. This is where the focal point of the demonstrations. It's been 10 days of demonstrations, and they peaked just over 24 hours ago when about 1 million people were said to have been gathered in that square. The atmosphere at the time was said to be festive. All that quickly turned in the past 24 hours when pro-Mubarak supporters came into the square. They came on camels, they came on horseback, and there were clashes. Overnight clashes sustained. This morning, as dawn broke, people once again started gathering in the square. There is a sense of calm, but very much a tense situation as we hear people chanting in the square again and gathering there. We can now bring in our correspondent who is in that square. Tell us what's happening.
Well, we're seeing some extraordinary images today of people's defiance here in Tahrir Square. I think the images that, the world saw yesterday as people on horseback and camelback with swords and knives, and the Molotov cocktails that had been thrown off onto the people below were, unimaginable to see how things turned violent so quickly after several days of what seemed to be peaceful protests here in Tahrir Square. Today, the scene is one of recovery and defiance from inside Liberation Square. I can tell you, having made the trip already into Tahrir Square a few times today from different areas, we have seen people from all walks of life trying to pour in. And what you've seen really, in short, are reinforcements. The numbers of people continue to come back into Tahrir Square. Everyone is bringing with them something. We've seen volunteer doctors. We've seen people bringing in medicine, Band-Aids. We've seen people bringing in food and water. And inside the square, once you come in, we've seen a lot of people on various parts of the intersection barricaded. They have essentially torn up this one construction site and put up metal barriers on all of the 5 or 6 entrances that lead into Tahrir Square. They have been reinforcing them all night, and they've begun to break off some of the pavement that leads to these roads. What they've been doing is ferrying sticks, metal rods, stones, whatever bricks they can get, anything that can be used as a projectile to kind of disperse the pro-Mubarak protesters from taking over Tahrir Square, because it seemed from the way everything played out yesterday here, this was the objective of the pro-Mubarak supporters. They wanted to try and disperse the anti-government demonstrators that were here in Tahrir Square, camped out for several days. It does not seem to have worked. The Liberation Square remains very much in control of the anti-government supporters. Their positions have been reinforced on all sides. On the bottom, on the street level, the people that we've been speaking to really have remained very much defiant, despite some of the most sustaining some of the most brutal injuries that we've seen in a long time down here. I've seen people who's had broken limbs, people whose heads have been gashed open, but nonetheless, people down here still very much pulling together. And as I was saying, now it's almost 11 o'clock in the morning here. People still pouring in Tahrir Square with whatever supplies they can bring to offer some kind of support, whether morally or materialistically, to the anti-government supporters. Now, as I was saying, all the entrances have been closed off into Tahrir Square, except one that leads from the western part of Cairo across the Nile into Liberation Square.
Okay, we're going to listen to the sound there right now. Stay with us. The momentum seems to be growing. Tell us, what are people saying?
Well, you've heard today a very slightly different tone, because I can tell you from being on the street and among the crowd, they have become much more determined in not only their chants, but have become much more hardened. Their positions really have hardened. And what you've been hearing throughout the course of the morning are some of the same chants you've heard over the past several days, that against the regime. But now they've started to take on as well a different tone in talking about yesterday's events, the criminality of it, the history of those who attacked them, that they have also, in the wake of that, refused to become violent. One of the things that I heard today on the streets, despite the fact that they were yesterday attacked, barely anything to defend themselves with, they turned around and said peaceful. They wanted this to be peaceful. And again, today they are still searching people coming in to make sure nobody brings anything with them. One lady who was coming in with a big pair of scissors, she said she was a anti-government supporter, that she was here to try to help people, and she brought the scissors to cut up whatever materials to make some kind of turnips for people with broken limbs. They wouldn't even let her bring in the scissors because they were afraid it could be used as a weapon. To give you a sense, really, the chants right now that you're hearing, again, invalid or illegitimate. That hasn't quieted down. In fact, just in the past few hours, again, the numbers of the protesters continues to grow, and so too do the chants.
Now, explain to me, earlier you described how one pro-Mubarak protester was in there and was pro-Mubarak supporter, rather, was in there and was surrounded, and maybe eventually, not entirely sure what happened to him. But explain to me how these pro-Mubarak supporters that were in there earlier have left now, and how it's clear who is in the square.
Well, it's when people are making their way into that one entrance point, as we were saying, there have been a few checkpoints that have been set up in a few places. People are coming in, they're checking their IDs, they're checking their belongings, and other than that, they're just simply letting them in. So it is very possible that a few of the pro-Mubarak supporters have been able to enter, but without anything that could cause some kind of risk or danger to the people inside. What seems to have happened is that one pro-Mubarak supporter, at least the one that I saw, managed to have gotten inside. he may have said something or said something that angered those around him. Now, whether or not he said something that was very blatant or even something that was very subtle, it certainly angered the crowd around him, because immediately a handful of people grabbed him and tried to actually move him out back to the entrance from which he came in. But as he was doing that, as they were doing that, it quickly spread that this was a pro-Mubarak supporter. A handful of other people jumped on him, started to beat him. He was knocked down onto the ground. But just as quickly, they picked him back up again. Everyone around him started chanting, no, they wanted this to be peaceful. Don't resort to the same violence they're using. Don't resort to the same violence. You heard that over and over again. And a handful of people did manage to grab this individual after he had been beaten and knocked down onto the ground. He was then taken to where one of the army tanks had been parked. The army then took this individual and he was escorted out of Tahrir Square. Now, it wasn't clear whether the army physically removed him out of the Tahrir Square, but it was clear that at one point he was given to the army, and the people that were around him made sure he did leave Tahrir Square. So, indeed, it is a scene where the people here want this protest to remain very peaceful, because, as I was saying, they're strictly enforcing that nobody brings in anything that can be used as a weapon or as any kind of instrument of injury.
Okay, so that brings me to another development there seems to have been. One of our correspondents was telling us about how the army is actually taking maybe a slightly more active role. Apparently, they've been fanning out. They've been trying to link up in a chain to stop any kind of clashes. Are you seeing any evidence of the army taking more measures to enforce security?
Well, I can tell you a few anecdotes that I've seen today, but nothing to suggest that this is a posture or an order that came down from the chain of command. What I did see, a group of foreign journalists, and we've been hearing reports since yesterday about foreign journalists being harassed, being attacked, and being chased away by these pro-Mubarak supporters. What I saw today was a group of foreign journalists who seemed to have been walking very similar in the same direction that I was walking in. They were then intercepted, or at least blocked, by these pro-Mubarak supporters. The situation became tense, and it seemed that they couldn't find a way to get out of the situation they were in. The only people they could run to were the soldiers that were on a nearby tank. The military at that point did take them in a bit of a position like a shelter. It's simply a tank, but they did push back the pro-Mubarak supporters, and they allowed these foreign journalists to stay with the tank until one of the soldiers then escorted the foreign journalists away. So you get a sense that outside of Tahrir Square at various points, these these pro-Mubarak supporters remain in small groups, still very much determined, very much adamant to create a sense of fear among those trying to get to Tahrir Square. The military, for its part, though, does not seem to have changed its posture around Tahrir Square. We have seen that they have, in some instances, lowered their state of alertness, meaning that they've taken off their flat jackets. They don't have all of their weapons with them in some of the places that I've seen. It doesn't mean that it's happening at all the entrances, but some positions I've seen slightly a little bit different posture than the one yesterday. People are very, very critical of the military for not doing more to prevent what happened yesterday, and there's no doubt that in the coming weeks and perhaps even in the coming months, there's going to be some very tough questions as to why the military allowed for this to happen, and more importantly, who was behind what seems to have been a very well orchestrated, very specific and intentional move by these pro-Mubarak supporters to come here to Liberation Square. Because when you look at how things unfolded yesterday, from the perspective of the equipment that they had on them, I mean, we saw people on horses, we saw people with knives, people with sticks, we saw people that had printed T-shirts that had already been made supporting pro-Mubarak, large posters. There were flyers that were being thrown on the streets. It seems to have been something more than just an impromptu rally for President Mubarak. And more interestingly enough, it must be asked, why did they decide to come to Liberation Square? Why did they decide, amidst all of the possible areas that they could have gone to, they could have drawn a lot of international media attention to their cause, why did these individuals decide to come to Tahrir Square in what was undoubtedly going to be a confrontation of some sort? There's a lot of theories and speculation about that. For those of us that have been covering Egypt for a long time, it has the hallmarks and a lot of the similar characteristics that we've seen in pre-election run-ups and other acts that have been orchestrated by those affiliated and close to the ruling National Democratic Party.
Thank you very much. That's our correspondent there in Cairo. You're looking at live pictures from Tahrir Square. where momentum seems to be growing in the protests. Many people had left overnight after clashes, but people, according to our correspondents, are gathering once again. You can see the entrance to that square has been barricaded by pro-democracy protesters. They were trying to stop pro-Mubarak supporters from entering. They've used anything they can to barricade one of those entrances. And standing on the sidelines is the army. This is Al Jazeera. We are rolling live and bringing you the latest from those protests in Egypt. And to put this all in perspective, we have Pascal Ghazaleh. She's a historian, and she can give us an idea and give some context on what is happening. Pascal Ghazaleh, thank you very much.